In the realm of mixed martial arts, rare are the fighters whose reputation precedes them, not just for their official knockout power in the octagon, but for the sheer devastation they bring behind closed doors. Ilia El Matador Topuria has emerged as one such modern legend. With an untarnished 1-7-0 record and back-to-back KO wins over elite icons such as Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira, his official achievements are remarkable. But it's the sparring law, unnerved teammates, top champions toppled in camp, that truly sets the myth in motion. Recently, a sparring session erupted into mainstream conversation after a reigning UFC champion was knocked out cold. This article dives into that jaw-dropping incident and explores how Topuria built such destructive power off the record. Ilia Topuria's rise has been meteoric. Initially crowned UFC featherweight champion, via UFC 298 KO of Alexander Volkanovski in February 2024, he vacated the 145-pound title to challenge at lightweight. His epic KO wins over Volkanovski and Max Holloway, KO in Round 2 and Round 3 respectively, solidified his reputation as one of the most fearsome strikers in MMA. On June 28, 2025, at UFC 317, Topuria obliterated former lightweight champion Charles Oliveira in just 2:27 of the first round. A devastating right hand rocketed Oliveira straight to the canvas, followed by a left hook that sealed the finish. Topuria became the UFC's first ever undefeated two-division champion and vaulted to the #1 pound-for-pound ranking in the promotion. Official knockout victories tell half the story. To grasp Topuria's true power, you must hear from those who felt it and lived to tell the tale. Burns revealed that during Topuria's stint training at Kill Cliff FC for his Josh Emmett fight prep, El Matador knocked out 3 teammates, all wearing big gloves designed to cushion heavy setup drills. The repeated sparring KOs shocked the camp and earned Topuria the reputation of the hardest puncher in the gym. Georgia's other UFC champion, Merab Dvalishvili, opened up on the Ariel Helwani show, confessing that Topuria dropped him twice with a brutal body shot during sparring, and he refused to go back. "Every time I finished sparring with him, I was happy and said thank God," Merab said, explaining that he simply couldn't train with his compatriot anymore due to the risk. Together, these stories paint a fighter who doesn't just spar hard, he ends sparring. Word of a particular sparring session involving Topuria and a current UFC champion has circulated behind the scenes for months, and finally, details have emerged that rival the legends themselves. According to insider reports, the session occurred during a joint training camp, where both fighters were preparing for upcoming events. Dubbed a technical sparring drill in promotions, the match was expected to be controlled and cooperative. Witnesses say Topuria, underestimating the guardian intentions of technical rounds, landed a clean, devastating right hand that dropped the UFC champion cold. The movement was lightning fast. Before the unsuspecting fighter hit the mat, the room fell silent. Medical staff rushed in. It wasn't a glitch in technique. It was pure, refined power, delivered with surgical precision. Early reports identified the opponent as a reigning champion, stunned by the impact. While the name remained speculative and unconfirmed publicly, the story spread rapidly once the athlete admitted the KO in camp. This unsanctioned moment, captured in fan recounts and gym chatter, cemented the nickname of Topuria as a sparring knockout specialist. What explains Topuria's ability to stop top UFC athletes, even elite champions, in sparring, albeit unintentionally? Let's break it down. Initially a grappler with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu roots, Topuria transformed his striking under coaches inspired by Mexican boxing phenoms like Canelo Alvarez. His fluid combinations, head movement, footwork, and shoulder roll defense serve as foundation for his power shots. Observers and Reddit commentators have marveled at how Topuria stops his spin elbows exactly at impact, maximizing force while maintaining balance. Evident in sparring clips of him landing elbow shots and strikes with control and surprise. Dvalishvili's body shot reveals Topuria doesn't just punch hard, he punches smartly. Delivery to vulnerable areas, liver, ribs, can incapacitate even the toughest fighters. Training partners report Topuria builds escalating tempo in sparring, After a few rounds of light combos, he steps up sudden, heavy blows that catch opponents off guard. In combination, these elements convert a training room into a potential hazard zone, especially when an unintended punch lands flush. Topuria's UFC 317 performance was the official crescendo of his extreme striking trajectory. The finish mirrored the precise mechanics seen in sparring, timing, angles, explosive combinations, and confirmed his growing dominance across weight classes. Sean O'Malley, impressed with the knockout, withdrew his earlier call-out to Topuria as a multi-division champ, and instead endorsed an even more explosive matchup, Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett, calling it the fight to make if Islam Makhachev isn't next. Paddy Pimblett, who sat cage-side at UFC 317, was captured live reacting with stunned disbelief as Topuria crashed Oliveira, then confronted Topuria and traded insults, further inflaming the rivalry. Arman Tsarukyan, Topuria's number 2 lightweight rival, accused him of ducking harder fight challenges and even issued a $500,000 bet if they ever face off. While Topuria reportedly avoided granting him a title shot, fueling public speculation and comparison to controversial avoidance in MMA history. What they say in sparring rooms: he KO'd our champ in camp. He dropped Merab. I can't spar with him. 3 teammates went down in one day at Killcliff. The claims are visceral, whispered, but shared by credible champions. What UFC data proves on fight night: the same precision, power, and ruthless efficiency in official PPV events captured in knockout highlight reels. The UFC 317 stadium finish stood as undeniable proof that Topuria's sparring explosiveness translates to legitimate world-class dominance. In essence, the myth of Topuria as a terror in sparring was validated under the bright lights of the octagon, and that renders future opponents unsettled before the bell even rings. Because visual verification matters as much as the story, witness a discussion and footage of his hard sparring and technical drills, including scenes hinting at genuine impact, likely from the session described above. This video reveals glimpses of Topuria's power behind the scenes, shots that land flush, reactions that look more than controlled. Fans speculate, is this from the wild sparring session that dropped a UFC champion? The expert timing, target selection, and sudden intensity align perfectly with the reports. Should controlled sparring ever include knockout power? Some camps tolerate light contact for rhythm. Others expect near-fight tempo to simulate conditions. But unintended KOs, even with protective gear, can endanger reputations and careers. Psychological impact. For fighters like Dvalishvili, being knocked down, even in camp, can cause long-term mental barriers. For sparring partners, it shifts dynamics from training to awareness. Media role. When sparring incidents leak, the narratives blur lines between myth and reality. Topuria's escalating legend only grew once that sparring KO was corroborated by teammates and revealed publicly. Now reigning undefeated double champion at 155 and 145 pounds, Topuria sits atop the UFC world. But the job is far from over. Paddy Pimblett, a grudge match likely exploding off UFC 317's tension. Islam Makhachev, a number 1 pound-for-pound showdown if Makhachev returns from welterweight ambitions. Justin Gaethje, Arman Tsarukyan. Gaethje's superfight intrigue or Tsarukyan's rematch narrative remain possibilities, though Topuria appears cautious on the latter front. Psychological edge. Any opponent stepping into camp with Topuria now carries greater trepidation. Will camps now fear what happens behind closed doors? Legacy building. At just 28, with undefeated status intact, Topuria could redefine what it means to be both a training camp terror and a cage finisher, following a lineage of legends who deliver in both arenas. For the vast majority of MMA fans, the knockout reels tell one story. But behind closed doors, the whispered rumors of sparring knockouts made Ilia Topuria's reputation ominous long before UFC 317. The wild sparring session that knocked out a UFC champion, whether a one-time freak or representative of cruel consistency, solidified a fighter whose raw training power matches his octagon performances. Today, Topuria isn't just undefeated. His unrelenting, defined equally by his official highlight finishes and the fear he instills in training rooms around the world. He doesn't need public accolades to prove his power. But when those accolades come, like UFC 317, they validate everything behind them.